everyone. Thank you so much for joining. As we wait for people to trickle in, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you are joining from and what grad program you're interested in, whether master's or PhD, in the area of study you're interested in. I love to incorporate some examples during my talk. So anything that I can make more specific, feel free to add information, again, where you're joining from and what degree and program you are thinking of applying to. Okay, so let's see. We are still, people are still joining, but I can get started. Oh, hi, Perla. Thank you so much for starting, being the first to write. You're from LA. Great. Ooh, library science. Perfect. Excellent. Oh, master's in finance, US and UK. You're studying in Italy. Awesome. Bangladesh. Hello, HCI, master's and PhD. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I will get us started so that we are right on time. Let's see. My name is Debbie, and I'm a Leland coach. I work in graduate admissions. So I'm a graduate admissions coach and consultant. My background is I worked at Stanford University. I was there for almost 10 years. I worked in different areas. Most of the areas I've worked in involved graduate admissions. I started in the registrar's office, working with all 52 departments on campus and professional schools, advising on graduate admissions policy and helping them with finalizing their admissions. I then worked in the School of Education, and then most of my experience was in their School of Engineering. I worked in the electrical engineering department. And this year marks my 11th year working as a graduate admissions coach and consultant. I worked with students from all over the world, students who are applying to master's and PhD programs in different areas of study. So engineering, education, so most of the social sciences, natural sciences, biosciences. So I have a wealth of experience in different areas of study. And truly enjoy my work and getting to know people as they start working on their graduate applications. I've also worked in consulting and research, business development, DEI efforts as it relates to first-generation college students and helping in terms of doing all sorts of fun consulting work. But primarily, I'm a graduate admissions coach and consultant. Okay, so today we are talking about graduate admissions, and this is going to be just a general overview. We will talk about degree options, application materials. I'll talk about who reads applications, so really inside the graduate admissions committee. I read many applications when I was at Stanford, again, applications for master's and PhD programs. So I can also give you my experience in terms of what that was like at Stanford and how I use that experience to support students as they are planning to apply to graduate school and as they are working on their application materials. So we'll talk about all of that, how to stand out. And throughout throughout the talk, we'll have some reflection exercises. So feel free to grab something to write with. Again, this is just for you, but depending on where you're at in this process, whether you're just now starting to think about applying to graduate school, if you now think this is the time, this is the year I am applying to graduate school, and you're not sure where to get started, these reflection exercises are really going to help you to start thinking about this process and where you fit in to all that. So let's get started. If you have questions, we'll have a Q&A at the end of the talk, so feel free to ask questions in the chat. And this recording, this presentation is being recorded. So for those who are just joining us, or if you need to leave early or you couldn't make it to the live, you will receive a copy of the recording. And lastly, throughout this talk, everyone is at different stages of applying to graduate school, of thinking about why they want an advanced degree. So it's okay not to know what you want yet or how to even get started with this process. I think that, you know, applying to graduate school is something that people think about doing. And then once they start to review the application requirements and all of the steps that are required, it can be intimidating. So that's where, you know, I step in. I love to, you know, I coach my students, I cheer for them, and really help them set a timeline that is specific for them in this process. So no matter where you're at in this process, hopefully this talk is going to be helpful to you in terms of getting started and getting organized. So let's get started with our first reflection exercise. And this is really something that I try to do with everyone I start working with, is try to understand why they want a graduate degree, right? And so for everyone, this is going to be very different. So maybe you are still an undergraduate student and you are going to be graduating college, and the next step for you is you want to go straight to grad school. Maybe you have graduated from college a few years ago, or more than that, and you're looking to, again, specialize in your industry. Maybe you're looking for a promotion. You want an advanced degree to move up in the ranks. Maybe you're looking to pivot, right? So maybe you've worked in an industry for a long time, and now you really want to try something new and you want to pivot to a different area of study. So again, there's no right answer here. Everyone is going to have their own reasons for wanting a graduate degree, and also understanding that for yourself is going to be helpful as you start to pick schools and programs that are going to meet your specific needs. And again, as you look at your learning and career goals, there are more questions you can ask yourself here, right? So will the graduate program, whether it's classes, research, practicum, will the program give you the skills, the knowledge, right, that you need in order to get the type of job or career that you're seeking, right? Some of the things we're going to look at today is, what are some factors to consider when you are looking at grad school programs, when you are looking to create a list of schools? So what's important to you in a grad school program? We'll definitely look at that later on, but initially, as you're starting to think about graduate school, what are some of the big ones, right? Oftentimes we think about ranking, geographic location, the format. Are you looking for in-person, hybrid program, full-time, part-time? Initially, what does that look like for you? And sometimes you want to consider what do you like? What are you good at? And do you want those things do you want to consider those things, those factors in a graduate program? So again, these are some questions to get you start thinking about grad school and some of the things that you are seeking in a grad program. Now, probably you've, if you're thinking about grad school, you probably went on a search engine and typed in grad school in HCI, in library science, in education, and then you are faced with pages and pages of different programs. How do you parse out all of the different programs that are out there? There's a lot, right? So master's programs, doctoral programs. We're not going to talk about all of that, but this is just an example of the types of programs that are out there. And when I work with students, some of the work that we do is trying to understand also what is the difference between a master's program and a PhD program, a doctoral program. If you're looking for a program that is more research intensive versus more professional program, what does that look like within a master's program or within a doctoral program? Same thing with the length of the program. If you're looking for a master's program, there's a wide variety of programs out there. Master's programs can last anywhere from 9 months to 3 years, depending on your area of study. Is that a factor you want to consider when you're searching for schools? If you're looking for doctoral programs, we're thinking more about 5 or 6 years. Now that's a big time investment. And just talking through the different options sometimes can be really helpful for you to understand what is available out there, right? Another reflection exercise that I like to do with the students I work with is really to understand what your parameters are, right? So some people come to me and they say, I have a list of about 20 or 30 schools right now, and I don't know how to start thinking about, trimming my list of schools, or what are some factors I should consider when I'm looking at programs. So these are things that we look at, the curriculum, right? So if you're looking at a graduate program in the US, so if you're looking at a master's program, for example, master's programs, in order to receive a master's degree in the US, typically you have to complete coursework. In many programs, research is optional, and that's something you want to consider. Do you want to do research as part of a master's degree, for example? Or do you want it to be only coursework? Many programs in the US, if you're looking at a Master's of Art or Master's of Science, might have a thesis component that is optional. So we look at the pros and cons of a lot of different programs and what that means for you and what you're looking for in a graduate program. If you're looking at programs, for example, in the UK, a lot of schools will have the master's taught versus a master's research. And as the title implies, a master's taught is a master's degree where, similar to the US, is mostly coursework versus a master's research, which is much more research focused, and so fewer lecture type classes, if you will. Again, going through all of the different requirements. Length of program, as we just talked about, it really depends on the length of time, right, that you're looking for. Are you looking for a 1-year program? Is that more appealing to you? Are you looking maybe for a 2-year master's program? Sometimes the length of program can be a determining factor for a lot of people. So those are things to consider. Ranking, that's a big one. When you're looking at ranking, a lot of programs, most graduate programs are ranked at the department level, but sometimes students want to consider the ranking of the university name. So what's important to you, and what are those parameters, again, that you want to set for yourself as you're looking for grad programs? Geographic location can be a big one as well. If you're looking at the US, I have a lot of students who might have a preference for studying only in California or maybe only on the East Coast. If you do have those preferences, again, that will help trim your list of schools. And again, other factors to consider, faculty advisor, again, if you are looking for a PhD program, obviously, if you're applying to a doctoral program, your research interests should be in line with the research interests of at least one professor in the department you are applying to. That's a big one. If you are applying for a PhD program, again, you'll find that there's a lot of work to be done when you are looking for schools to make sure that there is the research alignment between what you want to do research and what the department offers in terms of research labs and professors who are doing the type of research you want to do. Accreditation, the size of the school, format, are you looking for online, in person, hybrid? There are a lot of options right now. And so again, as you reflect on these different points here, that might help you tailor your list of schools. Inside the grad admissions office. So I often get a lot of questions from people about what was it like to work at Stanford, who reads applications, and what does that all look like? So in terms of the timing and frequency, so most graduate programs admit students once a year. So typically they admit students for fall admission. So for example, if you are applying to go to graduate school to start in the fall of 2026, your application deadlines are going to be anywhere starting at the end of November through January or February, depending again on the degree and program you're applying to. Typically, if you're applying to a PhD program, admissions deadlines are going to be December 1st, give or take a week. For master's programs, it could be anywhere in December, January, and February. So a lot of different deadlines to consider. Some professional programs will admit students year-round, but there are definitely fewer options if you are considering applying, for example, for spring admission. So if you are wanting to apply to start, for example, in January of 2026, then your application deadlines are likely going to be in May, June, or July, even August of 25. But that's something that I can help you figure out, you know, what programs are available to start, for example, in the fall versus in the spring, and look at all that. Application process overview. So each department, each school you apply to will have their own online application form. They will have their own application requirements and prerequisites. So definitely, if one school, one department you are considering applying to has application prerequisites, so specific classes they want you to have taken before the start of the program, it doesn't mean that all the schools you're applying to will have the same prerequisites. So it's really important to, as you finalize your list of schools, to understand those schools' application requirements and prerequisites. Again, something that I can support you with. Sometimes it's just understanding those prerequisites and what that means for your timeline of when to apply to graduate school. Now, admissions decisions. Departments, and this is something that we'll go over in a little bit in terms of how to stand out. But basically, applications are read by an admissions committee within the department you are applying to. So for example, when I worked at Stanford, I worked in the Department of Electrical Engineering, and the admissions committee was made up of professors in the department and some senior staff members. So I was a senior staff member helping to read applications for master's and PhD programs. And so about 2 or 3 people from the committee will read your application. So, and this is important to keep in mind, and I'll say why later. It's important to know who reads your application so you can also tailor your essays accordingly. So each department has their own admissions committee. Each department will decide who they want to admit to their program, right? So departments, admissions committees, they aim for well-rounded, diverse cohort. What does that mean? So one of the things that I love about graduate admissions, I've worked in graduate admissions for 20 years now. One of the things I enjoy about it, it's not a cookie cutter process. What that means is they're not trying to admit, everyone with a perfect GPA. They're not trying to admit everyone with a specific profile. So what makes one person stand out is going to be very different from what makes another person stand out. And that's really important. And something we'll talk about in a little bit is that diversity. And so, one of the things that when I start working with people, they might say, do you have an essay of someone who was admitted to Stanford's political science department? And I worked with a lot of people who applied to that department. I don't share essays because what made that person stand out is going to be very different from what makes you stand out as an applicant, right? And so that's why I love working with people. I love learning more about what makes you stand out and making sure that you are incorporating that in your essay, in your application. So departments do want a diverse cohort of students. They want people who have different types of experiences, who have different types of interests in their departments. And so you might see a cohort of students, so a group of students who are admitted. Some students are just graduating from college, and you have some students who might have worked for 1 or 2 years. You might have students who are pivoting from a different area. And it's that diversity in the cohort that really is what makes grad school a lot of fun. And so admission decisions, again, are made by professors and senior staff members in the department. They read applications, and so they're the ones who are going to decide who's admitted and what the cohort of students is going to look like in a given year. Now, why is this important to know all of that? And so, as I mentioned, applications are assessed by professors and senior staff members. And so they are experts in the field. And so when you are writing your statement of purpose, it's important for you to know that professors are going to be reading your application. So you should be using technical terminology to show them that you understand the scope of the topics you'll be studying, right? You're demonstrating your ability to engage in an academic environment, to be able to contribute in the classroom. So a lot of work that I do with the people I coach is really around the statement of purpose, to make sure that you are using that technical terminology, that you are providing examples in your statement of purpose to showcase that you do understand the scope of what you will be studying. So as you think about, again, another reflection exercise is, and this can help with establishing the timeline, right? Your timeline, if you start now and your goal is to apply this fall to start next fall, do you meet the requirements for applying to graduate school? Do you have the prerequisite classes needed? If not, then maybe now until the time you have to submit your application, you can take classes to help meet those prerequisites. Do you require experience in terms of applying to the degree program you're applying to. A lot of programs, for example, if you're looking for a master's in public policy or public administration, some of those programs require some work experience ahead of applying. So it's important to understand what each program you're applying to in department and school, what they require of their applicants, and how much time it will take you to meet those requirements. And this last reflection point here, can you describe in enough detail why you want to go to graduate school? So for example, what are your academic and research goals, and how do they relate to your career goals? And like I said at the beginning of the presentation, it's okay if you don't know. Sometimes people I work with, they come to me and they say, Debbie, I really want to go to graduate school, but I'm not even sure how to answer this question right now. And so some of the work we do is a lot of advising and that coaching and really trying to articulate their reasons for wanting to graduate school. So again, no matter where you're at in this process, it really is about ultimately defining what your academic goals are and how a graduate degree will help you get to the career goals you've set for yourself. Now, the application requirements. And again, here, as I mentioned at the bottom, I can't emphasize this enough, make sure that the application, you review the application requirements of every school you're applying to. They might be slightly different. Now, all the schools will require an application form, they'll require transcripts, and a resume at a very minimum. Standardized test scores. Do you need to take the GRE, the GMAT, the LSAT, the MCAT, depending on the program you're applying to? Do you need to submit TOEFL or IELTS, right? If you are an international student wanting to apply to a school in the US or in the UK or in Canada, do you need to show proof of English proficiency? Now, a lot of people come to me and tell me, I want to apply to graduate school. I don't have time to take the GRE, or I don't want to take the GRE. And since after the pandemic, we've seen a lot of programs. So during the pandemic, we saw a lot of schools switch to test optional admission. Now, since then, we've seen some schools go back to requiring standardized test scores, but some are still test optional and some of them still don't require them. So for example, Stanford Computer Science does not require GRE scores. If you submit them, they won't even look at them. So, so there are definitely different requirements as it relates to the standardized test scores, but a lot of students I work with might say, I don't want to apply to a school if they require the standardized test score. And we are able to come up with a very strong list of schools that does not require the GRE. Also just if you are looking for a standardized test tutor or coach, Leland has fantastic coaches if you're looking for support for GRE, GMAT, LSAT, MCAT support. So just a little plug there for our coaches who coach for standardized tests. They're awesome. Now, the next thing is the statement of purpose. This, if I had to, I often get this question, what is the most important part of the documents you're going to submit? The statement of purpose is definitely one of the most important parts of the application process. This is really your opportunity to communicate to admissions committee members, people who will be evaluating your application, why you want to go to their school, study in their department, and get a degree in their program. And so this is really your opportunity to shine. It's where I do a lot of the work, culminating again. So when I start working with someone, it's really oftentimes a long-term relationship, coaching relationship. We start talking about reasons for wanting a grad degree, and looking at developing a list of schools, learning more about the reasons for wanting to go to graduate school and how the goals you've set for yourself relate to your career goals. This is essentially what you want to put in your statement of purpose, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about the statement of purpose in a little bit, but I can't overemphasize this, how important it is. And so a lot of times people will use the statement of purpose as an autobiography, and it's basically an essay version of the resume. And that is not how you want to present your statement of purpose. It's really, the statement of purpose is really an opportunity for you to, the way that I put it actually is, I always try to tell the people I work with, imagine you're at a table sitting with the admissions committee members. What are things you would want to share about yourself as it relates to the program you're applying to, right? So you might give them a bit of an anecdote story about how you became interested in this particular area of study, right? What was that moment that made you think, I really want a master's or a PhD in this area? What are things that you've done in recently, right? So if you're in college or if you have some work experience, what are those key moments within those experiences that really solidified your decision for graduate school, or really helped you move through the process of learning more about the specific area of study, and now gaining an advanced degree is the natural next step for you, right? So the narrative of the story is really important. And I've been doing this for a long time. I have a lot of handouts for the students I work with. One handout in particular that I use is, I have what is the statement of purpose, and it really elaborates for the students I work with what should be included in the introduction, in the body paragraphs, and in the conclusion, right? So, and then we work through that handout together to really develop an essay that is specific to the applicant. Because again, what makes you stand out is going to be different from what makes another person stand out. So the work that we do on the essay and on the application is really just a lot of back and forth between myself and the person I work with. Letters of recommendations. Typically, 3 letters of recommendations are going to be required. I do a lot of work with the people I work with to understand, right, who should be a letter writer. How do you pick 3 people to write letters for you? Once you figured out who should write the letters, now letters should come from people who know you well, but also know the area you're studying. So if you're applying in areas of psychology, for example, so you want your letter writer to be someone who knows you well, but also maybe has also an advanced degree in psychology, in an area of psychology you're interested in. And so letter writers are really there to help you, to help your application and support, and basically write to admissions committee members that you are a good applicant, a strong student, and will be, again, a really good fit for the program you're applying to. So a lot of the work that I do with the people I coach is how to work with your letter writers and making sure that they are writing those strong letters of recommendations. So a lot of support in that area as well. And the other thing is your resume or your CV. Again, a lot of support there as well. How to stand out. And I think that, again, I've mentioned this, the statement of purpose is one of the most important parts of the application. Again, just going over some of the points I've already made, really reflect on how your previous experiences, so college, work, activities, how have those experiences equipped you for your specific field of study, right? You want to describe how these experiences have influenced your decision to go to graduate school and also to pursue a career in that field of study, right? This is important. I always say that grad school is, if the analogy I use is really, grad school is that bridge. So you have the experience and the education you have, and you have your career goals. But you can't get to your career goals unless you have the bridge, which is graduate school. And so your statement of purpose describes that path that you have, your experience, how graduate school will help you attain your goals that you've set for yourself, right? And so it really, the statement of purpose helps connect those dots between all of the aspects that I've just mentioned. And this is just advice, you know, based on, again, just having worked in this field for so long, is grad admissions is not about finding the best applicant by, you know, an objective standard like GPA. I often give this example. When I was at Stanford, my job could have been very easy. You know, we could have admitted everyone that had maybe a perfect GPA, perfect GRE scores, and just finished admissions in maybe a week, right? That could have been easy, but we didn't. It actually took us 2 months to review all the applications, because as, you know, admissions committee members, we reviewed all of the applications that were submitted. And maybe sometimes the GPA was a little lower, but there are other parts of the application that were extremely strong, right? And I've seen this time again working at Stanford, but also working as a coach and consultant, is that not everyone with a perfect GPA gets admitted. So a lot of people might rely too much on their GPA and not put as much effort in their statement of purpose. And maybe the GPA is not perfect, but the narrative in the statement of purpose is strong. The experience is strong. The reasons for wanting a graduate degree is compelling. So there are a lot of components that are involved in reviewing application and what makes an applicant stand out. And that's why I decided to go into coaching, is that a lot of people who might not feel that their application is strong enough because of a lower GPA, they might think, I'm not going to be admitted. So maybe I won't even give it a try. Definitely give it a try. I can definitely attest that it's not all about the GPA. Now, if you do have a strong GPA, fantastic, but you want to make sure that your narrative, your statement of purpose, your letters of recommendation, everything is strong, right? Again, I think I've probably said this a few times, but what makes one person stand out in this process is going to be very different from what makes you stand out. So I get this all the time. I work with people who might say, you know, I really want to apply to the physics department at Columbia, but my cousin applied 2 years ago and they had all of this experience and education, and I don't really have that. I can't compare to that. So I probably will not apply. So always remember, different things make applicants stand out. And so the application strategy and how I work with people is very much tailored to the individual. So keep that in mind as you are creating your list of schools. Don't compare yourself to others who might have applied to similar programs. And don't write something you think admissions committees want to read about, right? Be authentic. I think that that's really important, that you really shine through in your statement of purpose. And that's where also I can come in and make sure that you're really staying true to your story. So I will, I see that some questions are coming through in the chat room. I'll go over those. But I do want to thank people for joining today. If you want to book a one-on-one session, you can scan the QR code. I also offer consultations, so free consultations, 15-minute consultations if you have any questions or wanted to talk about your specific circumstances. But I will start going through the chat and looking for, let's see here. Okay, good question. So in terms of the difference between the statement of purpose versus the personal statement, what the difference is in that. And yes, I skipped through that part, but I should mention that. So when you're applying to graduate school, typically a statement of purpose is required. The statement of purpose is the academic essay. That's the essay I was mentioning about that is so important. A personal statement, on the other hand, is, as the title implies, is more of a narrative. So in graduate school, a personal statement often refers to, is tied to a scholarship or is a diversity essay. So if you are an underrepresented student in your area of study, if you're a first generation college student, you definitely want to talk about that in this essay. So it's basically, the statement of purpose is more academic and the personal statement is personal in nature. And again, I have handouts and can support people through that. Now, if the school you're applying to only requires a personal statement, assume that they're asking for a statement of purpose. Sometimes schools you're applying to will use those words interchangeably. So if they only ask for a personal statement, you definitely want to write an academic essay. If they ask for two, one of them is the academic essay, the other one is more personal in nature. And the personal essay is often tied to a diversity scholarship. Okay, another question I have is, what if your GPA is around 3.5? Or I get a lot of questions here about the GPA. Again, with the GPA, this is something that I often encourage students to write about. In the online application form, there often is a section that asks the question, do you feel your GPA, your undergraduate GPA, reflects how well you can do in a graduate program? So I always encourage students to address any issues they feel they have with their grades, not in the statement of purpose, sometimes not in the personal statement. It really depends on the circumstance, but oftentimes I encourage students to write a separate essay that you can upload in the online application form. If you have circumstances that have affected your GPA, whether you had, a bad year, first year of college, oftentimes that's the case. Students are new to college, they don't do as well, but then after, in their second year, their GPA tends to go up. So you definitely want to address that. If you've had medical circumstances, military, financial circumstances, you definitely want to address the circumstances that perhaps have led to a lower GPA, right? And that really affected your overall GPA. This is something that we saw if you went to college during the pandemic. This is an excellent reason to write about that. And writing it, not only describing the event, but how you overcame that experience and how after you've dealt with the experience, your grades have gone up. And that's something that I coach students on all the time, is how to perhaps talk about a lower GPA. Another question, should we include work experience if it's just 1 year? Not necessarily, right? So you want to make sure to be careful that it doesn't appear that you have big gaps in your resume. And especially if the work experience relates to the area you're applying to. So in terms of the resume, I often ask the people I work with to give me the full resume, right? A full CV. And then we can work together to figure out, do we want to put everything? Are there things in here that we should exclude, or, that will not necessarily help support your application in terms of sometimes extracurricular activities, or maybe things that you did in high school. So for a graduate school resume, your experiences should start in college. And then we can assess, based on the experiences you've had, what are things to include. So for students who are interested in a dual degree, a joint program, so there are a lot of joint programs right now, JD programs, PhD, MBA programs with master's programs. Are there specific things to be mindful of in terms of how to approach the application process? This is a great question. So if you are applying to a joint degree program, you are most likely going to be applying to those two programs at the same time. So you want to make sure that you are aware of the application requirements for both programs. So if you're applying to a JD and a PhD, you want to understand what the application requirements are for the JD and for the PhD. They might have different application deadlines. So I would strongly recommend connecting with an admissions person at the schools you're applying to have an understanding of the application process for the joint program. That's super important. Let's see. So timelines, quickly with the timeline. So if you're starting the process now and you are applying this fall to start in the fall of 26, now is a good time to start exploring those programs, right? And answering those questions as to why you want a grad degree. Now is also a really good time for you to start thinking about who are the 3 people I'm going to ask for letters of recommendations. That's a process that I like to recommend starting early on, especially if it's not obvious who those 3 people are going to be. So if you can list 2 people and maybe you're not sure who the 3rd person is going to be, now is a really good time to start thinking about, if I'm taking a class, do I need a professor to write a letter for me? Maybe I need to start going to office hours. Maybe I need to connect more with professors, or maybe during my internship this summer, the goal is going to be to ask for a letter of recommendation. So the sooner you can start thinking about who your letter writers will be, this process is going to be much easier, but also starting to explore the different programs out there and what your specific requirements are in terms of the programs you're seeking. I think we are at time. Let's see here. What types of people should ask for recommendation letters? So again, with letters of recommendations, they should come from people who know you well. and who know the program you're applying to. If you're applying to a PhD program, I highly recommend 3 letters of recommendations from professors who know you, at least 1 or 2 professors you have done research with. If you're applying to a master's program, 2 letters should come from professors, and 1 can come from if you've done an internship, if you have work experience. With a master's program, if it's not research focused, then having 2 professors and 1 non-academic letter is perfectly fine. If you've been out of school for a few years and you haven't stayed in touch with professors, oftentimes, you know, it's perfectly fine to have maybe 1 academic and 2 non-academic. I've also worked with many people who have 3 non-academic letters. So everyone's circumstances is going to be a little different when it comes to letters of recommendations, and something that I'm happy to discuss further as well. So thank you again for joining today. Again, definitely feel free to schedule a consultation with me. You can scan the QR code, schedule a 15-minute consultation. I'm happy to answer your questions. And of course, I'm happy to help you as well as you work on your grad applications. Thank you so much for joining today.